Welcome to How People Move People, a podcast about the impact that our words, art, stories, and lives have on each other. Each series journey unfolds in a sequence of 6 episodes. The first series, titled Back and Forth, is hosted by Cara Hagan, a New York City-based choreographer, professor, and mother who explores the influence of pop culture on the lives of Black girls from the 1990s to today. Guests range from poets and thought leaders to mom and daughter teams to an original fly girl from the Wayans brothers' hit 90s TV show In Living Color.
Welcome, friends. If you listened to the last episode, you heard my conversation with mother and daughter Tiffany and Raina Christian. On this episode, I have the pleasure of speaking to Dr. Julie Johnson, the chair of dance and performance at Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia. I first met Dr. Johnson at the International Association of Blacks in Dance Conference in 2017, where we sat on a panel together convened by the legendary Dr. Brenda Dixon Gottschalk. For those of you unfamiliar with Dr. Gottschalk, she is arguably the preeminent scholar on Black dance in America. Since our meeting, I have come to know Julie Johnson as one of the most generous educators in the field of dance and dance studies, as well as an astute artist whose work engages community through a social justice framework. For this conversation, I am joined by Dr. Johnson and 2 of her undergraduate students, Asili Johnson, no relation, and Anaya Hicks. Dr. Johnson, I want to start with you. And before we delve more deeply into your work in the world, I want you to tell me a little bit about your childhood. What was it like growing up? Where did you grow up? Who did you grow up around? What were you watching, listening to, reading?
Wow. Okay. Well, first I want to say thank you so much for inviting me into this conversation. I'm really happy to be here representing the Department of Dance, Performance, and Choreography with 2 of my students. But yeah, when you asked me to join this conversation, it just sent me down this rabbit hole. And I guess the first thing that came up was my mother's daycare that she ran out of our home. I think it was sometime between ages 3 and 5 for me. And both she and my father were really, such strong music lovers. And my mom would always explain that music, dance, the arts were a vital mode of expressing the human experience. So I remember these early days of dancing in the living room with neighborhood kids to things like Motown. I mean, my father raised us on Motown, and Joni Mitchell and Carole King. I remember having conversations with my mother about what is the Big Yellow Taxi song and why would people want to pave over trees for a parking lot, and think, having all of these songs not only just infuse in my body these rhythms, but also a sense of social responsibility.
I think everyone has a piece of media that stays with them more than others. So in this moment, because I know it might change from day to day, week to week, but what would you say was the most influential piece of media to you? And how did that media influence you as a mover?
Okay, so I guess I'll come back to the Fly Girls and Living Color, and watching those dance interludes in between the sketches. It was so exciting to me. They took up so much space. They were fierce. They were beautiful. They were powerful. I remember trying to emulate some of those dances. And also feeling excited about seeing them do some of the things that my friends and I were doing, just kind of playing around, or on the playground, or in a friend's basement, or at parties, and having it feel really legitimate. And of course they killed it. They did it so much better than than us. But yeah, it was inspiring for sure. So that stands out.
No, I agree. That's definitely one of my big ones too, for sure, hands down. I've mentioned it in so many spaces where people have asked me a similar question, and I always come back to the Fly Girls. So now you're all grown up. You're this amazing artist doing work in the world and teaching the youth about social responsibility through dance. So tell me a little bit about your work and how what you grew up with continues to influence that work.
So I think um, it's that sense of value and legitimacy that I felt watching the Fly Girls that is coming to mind right now. Um, and, you know, loving the opportunity to instill in students that their own embodied knowledge, that their modes of youth culture and their modes of cultural production um, are valuable, are legitimate, are just as important as anything that they are training in, and that is very much a part of the training in the curriculum in our dance department at Spelman College. I had the honor of taking on one of our dance history courses that was created by Dr. Vita Goler called Black Presence and American Dance. Um, and it is so affirming to look at all of the ways in which um, black blackness, black lives, black embodiment, black history, black knowledge is um, really at the root of American culture, that it is American culture. And so that shows up in our dance theory classes and our choreographic process classes and our technique classes. It's all there. And so that feels really wonderful. And I feel very fortunate to be a part of that along with my colleagues in the department.
Mm. So tell me a particular project that you are working on right now. What's going on for you artistically, and how are some of these influences showing up in those spaces?
I am a lead artist and director for a collaboration called Idle Crimes and Heavy Work. This is an endeavor that is taking place through my creative practice, Moving Our Stories, that amplifies or explores Georgia's history of incarcerated labor through the experiences of Black women, through their experiences of labor, resistance, and restoration. And so we are looking at the progressive era, right? So this, the late 1800s, early 1900s, where these, laws, structures, policies um, emerge to criminalize Black bodies, to incarcerate Black bodies, and to continue to extract free labor towards the building of the infrastructure of the South. And so in this work where we are, digging into archives to find stories of real women and connecting them to sites around Atlanta, um, that are embedded with Black women's labor in ways that might not be visible to the eye, in our or in our daily lives. Um, and so not only are we digging into um, archival collections, institutions, but also into our bodies and understanding our bodies as archives. So there are going to be lots of things missing from the archives about Black women's experiences because the people who were creating these archives in the first place either didn't necessarily care, didn't necessarily understand. And so we turn to our bodies to find what was missing, what may have been passed down, um, you know, generationally. Uh, and one of those things is, how we can understand work and labor through our body, but also sisterhood, joy, things that have always been part of our story, not just the oppression, right? And so when I think about dances that have been passed down to me, when I think about the dances that we created in our youth, um, there's so much information there about our lives collectively as Black girls and Black women. So it feels exciting to kind of pin those pieces together.
So Anaya and Asili, I want to bring you two into the conversation. So either one of you start by just saying your name and where you are in your collegiate journey, like maybe you're a rising sophomore, junior, whatever you are, and tell us a little bit about what you're watching, reading, listening to these days.
So I can start. Hi everyone, my name is Anaya Hicks, and I am a rising junior dance performance and choreography major. Whoop, whoop. And some of the things that I am currently reading, watching, listening to right now, I am currently listening to a lot of like old Prince, and I'm not talking about like Purple Rain Prince, like all the way back, like his first album, For You Prince, like demo stuff Prince. And for me, it really ties into just sort of the cultural like melting pot that I grew up in, as like in my family, and my parents are both musicians, so we were always hearing like different styles of music in the house. So I always like pull back from things that I've listened to as a kid. And watching currently, I'm on a social media like strike right now because screens are kind of draining right now. So it's a lot of listening and reading, and books right now is All About Love, Bell Hooks. Yeah.
Alrighty. Hi, everyone. My name is Asili. I am a rising junior economics and dance performance and choreography double major at Spelman. My father is a West African drummer, but he's also a historian and loves to talk and lecture and just enrich me with a lot of the history of music. So I grew up on a lot of the beginning of hip hop, the beginning of jazz, and my grandmother is a jazz singer and my grandfather's a jazz musician. So a lot of that Black vernacular music has been in my life ever since I was younger. I'm really in love with poetry at the moment. And I love a lot of Rupi Kaur books, a lot of Bell Hooks, a lot of Nikki Giovanni, and just finding those ways, that those pathways of what they were saying, how they enrich myself, but also what do they make me feel, and where do I find these connections in my daily life, and then how does it enrich my academic work as well as my movement in school, and where can I find those intersections. And as far as me watching, I am on social media a lot these days, in just on the opposite side of Anaya. And I think because it inspires me a lot more. Like I find myself watching other dancers and other movers and seeing artwork and things, and just wanting to always find those information and those connections with people and figuring out, okay, all right, cool. That's what they're up to. All right. Now how can I put this into my own work, my own things?
Yeah, I love it. And both of you are kind of speaking to this, both lineage, of course. You've named some things that are totally not of your generation and things that are of your generation, and of the fluidity with which we consume media, right? Like we're never consuming the same thing at the same time. We go on different trajectories with what we consume. We have different periods where we're listening to this really heavy, and then we move out of that and listen to something else really heavily or watch something else really heavily. So one thing that I'm wondering is how what you're listening to or watching follows you into your work with Dr. Johnson and other folks that you meet at Spelman. And you touched on this a little bit, Asili, which I really appreciated. So if we could talk about that a little bit more as a group, that'd be so wonderful.
one of my first classes that I took was improvisation with T. Lang, who is one of our esteemed faculty in the dance department. And I wasn't a big improv person before I went in there. So really taking that in and allowing myself to be open at the same time was a challenge, but then it also made me the mover that I am today. And using the movement and retrograding and moving it and playing with backspace, playing with the energy, the negative space, and still adding in your touches, but also watching how the other people in the class moved and took their own movement and added it in while also picking and choosing from what the other person did and trying to one up or trying to like get into their movement style. So all in all, I want to say that it's a really collaborative space, and whatever you've seen earlier in the day or whatever you listened to, you kind of bring it into the space with you and allow it to take over that day. That's what I've witnessed a lot in our department is that okay, well whatever I'm feeling today, all right, how can I put it onto the floor? Or how can I tell a story with it and then move from there?
So over the last year, we did a lot of things I had never done. My background is like I'm a competition dancer, and I grew up like in the glitter rhinestone costumes, and you wait for your award, and you get the badge, and it says Star Quest on it, and like all those things. I danced in a cemetery with our guest artist for Spelman Dance Theater, Talani Marine, who's very awesome. And that was an experience I had never had before. Like doing site-based work was something I had never had an experience before. And before you come into another, like, this is another ecosystem that we're all joining and being a part of. So coming in, it was a little bit strange getting acclimated to it, but at the same time, it's stuff that you all add into the language that we're all speaking and communicating with one another. And I discovered that it all ties in together, the moving body and the moving mind. They all like it feeds off of one another.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to add really quickly to that, like something that I really appreciate about the department and about like just dance at Spelman in particular is we're movers and we're thinkers, but there's times where our professors will see that we're in our head so much and they'll tell us like literally put the academics down. Like don't think. Don't think, don't try to analyze, just move and see what your body does. And that's what I like personally sometimes is that I'll get so stuck in, gosh, I have to write this essay about the Black vernacular movement and the Black presence in American dance with Dr. J. And I'm like, okay, like, can I put this down? Yeah. So, but then when we have those conversations the next day with Dr. J and Professor Cat and T Lang and Cece, it's like, okay, were you able to ever put it down and just move and see what your body does? And then were you able to go back and reflect and do that instead of just trying to write, or move? You have to put one down and pick one up and then put the other down and pick it up. So they give us that space and that authority within ourselves to make those conscious decisions. And yeah, it's just, there's not a lot of places like that anymore. And that's something very special about our space at Spelman.
Beautiful. Do you have anything to add to that, Dr. Johnston?
I just feel very loved in this moment. I appreciate the affirmations because it's so great to hear, your experiences, Anaya and Asili, as students. And I tell my students I'm always learning from them. So I am reflecting on thinking of it as Anaya said, as an ecosystem. So every student is coming in with their unique perspectives and their cultural experiences. So every class is different, every semester is different, every academic year is different. And to find the ways in which we all, kind of intersect and build off of each other is one of the things that fascinates me the most.
Yeah, and you know what I'm hearing? Because we're talking about Black people studying Black vernacular art, and you, both of the students, came in already with so much knowledge about things that are not happening in your lifetime, right? I think there's this perception that young folks don't know where they've come from or don't know where the influences of the things that you're listening to and watching and reading are from, but clearly you all do, and clearly a lot of other young folks do too. So when you're thinking about being people who are already steeped in Black culture in the ways that you are, and B, studying Black culture through a critical lens, how do you kind of reconcile those two pieces and parts of yourself? And do you feel like in your regular everyday life, not in your academic space, and in your academic space, are you seeing those connections between those things that, you're seeing on TikTok and the early jazz music that you were listening to?
Okay, I can start on this. A lot to take in. Um, when you're young and you're into like certain things that are older than you, I feel like a lot of times you get the you're an old soul distinguishing, and it then separates you from the rest of your generation who may or may not be consuming that same media. So it's kind of a dichotomy in a sense where you're existing alone outside of this group of people who are now in the know for what is current and present versus someone who is in the middle of a swirling sort of infinite universe. And growing up, I shied away. I think my preference to what isn't of this generation to what is because in my home, like that was what was affirmed. And even though we had access to television and we were fortunate enough to have access to internet in my neighborhood, we just, as we got older, me and my siblings, we didn't really gravitate towards any of that because we were all, by the point of our like adolescence, in a creative practice. So mine is dance. For my two other siblings, it's music. And then my parents are both musicians. So coming into a public school setting or somewhere where there are other people, other children, and you're meeting other folks that are your age, and you're asking, well, people are like, well, what are you listening to? And as Dr. J said, I grew up listening to Carole King as well. So telling other kids, yeah, I'm listening to Carole King, and my friends are like, well, who's Carole King? And oftentimes, I grew up on the border of Washington, D.C. and Maryland, so like Prince George's County area. A lot of times, like for our community, it can feel like a pulling, like a separation from, like you are a part of a certain group of people that consume a certain type of media, and we're consuming the normal media as far as like what is hip and current to our generation. So a lot of times, like I feel disconnected in a way from people my age because I don't really, even now in my adulthood, like I said, social media is my antithesis. I absolutely hate social media. So you're seeing a repeat of thoughts constantly over and over and over again. And it has me like thinking to myself, like, how do we develop public speaking or our own thought process if we're all feeding off of this one parasitic thought that just gets very over time, over and over and over again, down your timeline every 30 seconds?
I'm going to go off of Anaya's last thought. So, social media, and like Anaya said, we have a battle. It's a push and a pull, and I sometimes I'm pulling teeth. I'm like, Anaya, you don't have to have the app on your phone. At least just go to Safari on your phone and just look at what I just sent you. Um, and a conversation that I've had with Anaya is, don't worry about the algorithm. Don't worry about so much of the feed. Find what you can take from it and leave what you can't. And you don't have to agree, you don't have to disagree, but just take what you can And if it inspires you, beautiful. If it doesn't, okay, like move on to the next thing. I remember when I was, I think both me and Anaya are '02 babies. We were born in '02. And that was at the end for me, I guess in my household, my mother and my father are born in the 70s, and my mom is 73, my father is 71. And I grew up listening to the evolution of hip hop and a lot of those things while also having jazz. But the funny part is my mother hates hip hop a lot of times, unless it's like very, very old school. So a lot of times when I was with my mom, I was listening to Aretha Franklin, Al Green, John Mayer, like a lot of soulful R&B music. And I had that influence while also having hip hop and very traditional West African music in my household, while also going to church, while also being in different environments and taking all of that in and saying to myself, okay, like what can you do with this and how does it affect you and inform you? And I think it was because of the music and the way that my family had me grow up. It was kind of you stay true to who you are and how we raised you, but at the same time, come to us with those questions and those things that you feel like doesn't resonate with you, and we can have that discussion, that dialogue.
Yeah. Thank you for all that. And you mentioned, public speaking and that kind of thing. And that's movement too, right? Like you are moving energy, moving words, helping people to mobilize people. So that also matters and is a big part of what we do in the world as artists. And so to wrap up, I'd love to know, what has everybody excited today in this moment? Is there a song that you are jamming to that you have on repeat? Is there a show that you are binging? Is there a book that you are reading all night? What is shining for you today?
Stranger Things is really popular right now in my household. And it started, we kind of stumbled on it, but right now, me and my dad, and I think my second oldest brother, were all binging Stranger Things. And it totally circumstantial. Like we didn't plan for it to happen, but now we're on season 4 and we started season 2 maybe last week. So yeah, that's for Stranger Things for us for sure.
All right. What else?
I also binge Stranger Things and a show called Severance, just like really absurd and kind of dark, and enjoying that as like an escape uh, from reality. Um, and I am enjoying the conversations around Beyonce's new album and like all those conversations around, connections to house, and remembering back when my friends, like um, uh, learned a lot of house dance without realizing I was learning it from friends. And So these conversations about, what's new, what's old, what's coming back again, what if people have where in what spaces have things like house dance never died off, right? So just, the kind of the existence of these multiple spaces and experiences are super interesting to me. Um, yeah, and as an educator, I'm enjoying what, Celia was just talking about, and watching um, kind of this generation navigate all these different spaces and bringing their whole selves in ways that I think sometimes when I was younger, I didn't quite figure out for some time. Like things felt compartmentalized. Um, Going to a party and being like, am I supposed to pot a beret and pirouette here? No, this is not where I do this. So yeah, having them kind of buck those conventions and norms is really um, fun to watch.
Speaking of potable rays, it was funny. I was teaching people how to do I can't, I think it was the Cupid Shuffle and some other like line dances, and I was usually like chasse, pas de bourrée, and then you turn, half turn, now to the right. Yes, that resonated with me real quick. For me right now, music wise, something about the song Rain by Sunday Service Choir, which is Kanye West's choir. That song has just been on repeat for me, as well as 16 Shots by Stefflon Don. Um, those have like, which two opposite sides of the spectrum, have been very just in my head a lot and on repeat and breaking down the music and listening to for different nuances. Show wise, it has been, which is crazy because I should have watched it when it first came out because it's making more sense. I'm a Marvel head and I am a big Avengers person. So I've seen every movie of every series from phase one to now. I'm watching Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So that's been me binge watching that, and it's making more sense now. Like all of the different movies and things with this series, it's making a lot of sense. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was really fun.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Join us next time, where I talk hip hop, inspiration, and talking to the little girls inside of us with Michelle Bird McPhee of the Ladies of Hip Hop.
How People Move People is brought to you by the National Center for Choreography at the University of Akron, or NCC Akron. This podcast is produced by Jennifer Edwards. James Sleeman is our editor. Theme music by Ellis Roven. Transcription by Arushi Singh. Cover art by Micah Krause. I am Dacre Baptiste, Vice President and COO at the Orpheum Theater Group in Memphis, Tennessee, and a proud NCC Akron board member. Special thanks to the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation for their continued support of NCC Akron programming like this. To learn more about NCC Akron, please visit us at nccakron.org and follow us on Instagram or Facebook at NCC Akron. We hope you enjoyed this episode and encourage you to subscribe on your favorite podcast streaming platform by searching for How People Move People.